All right, so good afternoon, everyone. For our group, we will be discussing about our reading 7, which is basically Confucius Analects in Philosophy 171. So my group consists of me, Keesha, Mina, Casey Maralli, and Shakira Ledona. So let us now move on to who Confucius is.
So to start off, let me introduce who Confucius is. For sure, everybody knows or at least heard about him in the past, so allow me to introduce him again. Confucius is known as the first teacher in China who worked for universal access to education and for establishing teaching as a profession. Likewise, he created moral, ethical, and social norms that served as the foundation of the Confucian way of life or Confucianism, in which we will discuss further later on. So, the Confucian way of life reflects a deep philosophy that goes beyond morals to represent a holistic way of living. Confucianism is based on the idea that moral conduct is an integrated structure that leads people to harmonious relationships with themselves and with society, rather than just a series of laws to be obeyed. Confucius seems so successful in goodness that what he desires comes to him unintentionally rather than intentionally prying around or seeking out knowledge. So, as mentioned earlier, Confucius is the first Chinese teacher who wanted to make education accessible for everyone. So, his idea of learning has more to do with the actual behavior than academic theory, and he's more interested in learning that is applicable to real world situations, abstract philosophical ideas. Back then, the ancients thought of learning as cultivating the self, but now people think about it as the pursuit of knowledge. So there are three stages of learning according to Li Chong. First, mastering the basics, next, discussing with fellow students and working hard at mastering them, and lastly, becoming a teacher of others. I am sure that all of us practice different techniques of learning. However, at some point, we've also tried doing the steps mentioned. Personally, these stages of learning work for me as I persistently try to learn things by starting off with mastering the basics in order for me to understand more complex ideas later on. Discussing with others afterwards helps in retaining and adding up to the information based on what I initially know. This also emphasizes the importance of practice as opposed to academic theoretical knowledge. Moving on, let's now discuss filial piety and the importance of respect, especially towards elders. In the Cambridge Dictionary, filial piety is defined as the idea that parents, grandparents, and older people should be treated with honor and respect. Similarly, filial piety emphasizes the shared obligation and respect that children must have for their parents. This means that a child must ought to remain polite and should not do anything that they might upset his parents. However, this excludes concerns about health because it is beyond one's control. Being filial also means simply being able to provide one's parents with nourishment, but even animals are provided with it. So, what is the difference between humans and animals if we don't show respect? It is important to note that true filial piety involves not only the respect due to any elder family member, but in addition a kind of spontaneous, profoundly affectionate bond. There are four great human relationships. First, husband-wife, child-parent, minister-lord, and lastly, friend-to-friend. These relationships are crucial to Confucianism as it serves as the fundamental foundation of a peaceful and well-organized society in which every individual must fulfill their duties with morality and integrity. And in addition, seriousness bonds these relationships as well, and it is defined as the kind of genuine emotional commitment in the Confucian way. Improving one's actual behavior can be manifested through social interactions with others, and these others can be one of your family members, a random person, or even a friend. A friend, as defined in Confucius Analects, is a person who you share moral aspirations with. And likewise, a true friend and virtue serves as a support and comfort. This is also where trustworthiness enters. It is said that trustworthiness is closely related to rightness and must be practiced with an eye toward what is right to manifest a harmonious relationship. In order to build mutual respect and trust in relationships, one must be trustworthy by acting with consistency, honesty, and genuineness. And in order to foster an atmosphere of mutual understanding and peace, people are guided to act with integrity and righteousness in their relationships. So, the main point of everything is that knowledge is more relevant to one's real behavior than it is to abstract ideas. And for the second book in Confucius Analects, we will discuss political order and ruling through the power of virtue rather than force. Political order is not obtained by means of force or government regulations, but rather by the non coercive influence of the morally perfected person. Confucius believed that the path to achieving political order is to have leaders who rule with kindness, justice, and moral integrity. Let me quote what he said. If you try to guide the common people with coercive regulations and keep them in line with punishments, the common people will become evasive and will have no sense of shame. If, however, you guide them with virtue and keep them in line by means of ritual, the people will have a sense of shame and will rectify themselves. So, to put it in simpler terms, he believes that people would become clever and lose their sense of respect if leaders attempt to govern them through harsh rules and punishment. On the other hand, people will feel a sense of respect and behave better naturally if rulers lead with morality, set an example, and respect traditions and rights. Lastly, let's discuss Confucius' spiritual autobiography, which tracks his journey from being a humble seeker of wisdom to revered teacher and philosopher, navigating through personal challenges and societal chaos while striving to impart moral guidance and cultivate virtue. So there are three pairs of stages for this, which are now flashed on the screen. So first, he shows a commitment to the Confucian way of life by putting himself through the trials of study and ritual practice until these traditional practices have been fully integrated. Next, really settle into this new way of being. And lastly, the state of Wu Wei, which will be discussed further by Keesha.
So now let us move on to the supreme virtue of goodness, which is in book 4. So I actually entitled it this title mainly because this book concerns about people who lived in a Confucian way and the Wu Wei fashion, which basically means completely and consciously and effortlessly, are people who fully embody the virtue of goodness. So this book starts off with this dialogue. It says, to live in the neighborhood of good is fine. If one does not choose to dwell among those who are good, how will one obtain wisdom? Now, this actually has two main interpretations. One is in a literal, and the other one is in a metaphorical interpretation. In a literal interpretation, a gentleman is picky in choosing his neighborhood and his travels in order to guard against depravity and crudeness. So this basically means that someone's character development is highly affected by its environment. In a metaphorical sense, it basically this book stated two kinds of examples. So first is the arrow maker and the armor maker. How does one fully weigh which one is better and which one has the quality of goodness better than the other when they're just actually doing their job? The other one is a shaman or a coffin maker. And you can state here that one cannot be careful in the choice of one's profession. One should be careful in choosing one's environment. So the master also said that only one who is good is able to truly love others or despise others. The good person loves what is really worthy of admiration in others and despises what that which is genuinely despicable in them. This is why such a person is said to be able to love others and despise others. And the master also said that merely set your heart sincerely upon goodness, and you will be free of bad intentions. So this was argued by Kong Angguo and Li Wei, where Kong Angguo said, if you are able to set your heart sincerely upon goodness, then in other respects you will forever be free of badness. And Li Wei said against the second reading, noting that if the passage means that one who has set his heart sincerely upon goodness will be free of wrongdoing, what would be the point of saying it? Of course, a person who has set his heart sincerely upon goodness will be free of wrongdoing. It is more likely that the original meaning is that one will be free of bad intentions. So this basically says that the true gentleman is dedicated to the way as an end itself, and it does not pursue it for the sake of external goods. So this basically implies the people who live in a Confucian way and the Wu Wei fashion. So for the next slide, It says that where there is goodness, there is no poverty or hardship. Where goodness is lacking, there is no wealth or honor. So, with this statement, the students kept on doubting because they said that they had not met anyone who had tried loved goodness and hated the lack of it. So, the master answered against this by saying that when there is desire for goodness, there is a presence of goodness. And the master kept on diving into the topic of moral attainment, which basically is the positive, unself-conscious love of goodness being superior to a mere aversion to immorality. So in the next slide, it says people are true to type with regard to what sort of mistakes they make. Observe closely the sort of mistakes a person makes, then you will know his character. So Kong Angguo, for instance, said the fact that petty people are not able to act like gentlemen is not their fault. And so one should be understanding and not blame them. If you observe their mistakes, you can put both worthies and the fools in their proper places, and this is what it means to be good. In the next slide, it says, having in the morning heard that the way was being put into practice, I could die that evening without regret. So this was pointed out by Luan Zhao, where he says that this was the time where Confucius was slowly approaching death and has yet to hear that the world has adopted to the way. And he said that Confucius was pained that the way is not being put into practice, and moreover, makes it clear that he is more concerned about the world than his own self. And Zushi said that if one were able to hear the way, one's life would flow easily and one's death would come peacefully. There would be no more regrets. And it also states here that these two dialogues, which basically says, gentlemen understand rightness, a petty person understand profit. And when you see someone who is worthy, concentrate upon becoming their equal. When you see someone who is unworthy, use this as an opportunity to look within yourself. So you can tell here that whenever you see a person that is completely worthy, find a way to equate to what they're doing, to equate to how they are. And when you see someone who is unworthy, try to use that as a self-reflection that what does this person have that I have, and what are the ways that I could change that? And then for the next slide, it mostly talks about the dynamic of a family, specifically with parents. So Confucius actually delved quite deep into this, and this is where he pointed out these main points, which basically are you must gently remonstrate with your parents. You should not take criticism and not disrespect them, and you should always follow them without resentment. And you should not travel far while they are still alive, and you should always be aware of their age. And he even stated that one who makes no changes to the ways of his father for 3 years after his death, after his father has passed away, may be called a filial son. So in here, he stated that you should always be aware of your parents' age. This is because you should always count how many days or how many years you have left more with them, what you should do to be able to make it up within those few years or days that you have. And this was actually doubted, and it received a lot of backlash and negative comments from a lot of people because he fully believed in this type of dynamic. For the next one is people in the ancient times. So when he delved quite deep into this, he stated that people in the ancient times were not so eager to speak because they were quite ashamed because they're afraid that their words do not equate to their actions. So this is because the ancient people at the time valued action way more than words, and they would always be scared if they say this, what if it doesn't equate to their action, or what if they can't fully do what they were able to say? And Confucius compared it to the modern day where nowadays people value words more than action, which is a very unfortunate characteristic that most people have now. And it ends this topic with the statement that the gentleman wishes to be slow to speak but quick to act. And the next one, this book was ended with these two dialogues where it says, virtue is never solitary. It always has neighbors. So it states here that virtue is never one-sided in a true gentleman. He is always both internally respectful and outwardly righteous. So Zio ended this book by saying that being overbearing in service to a lord will lead to disgrace, while in relating to friends and companions, it will lead to estrangement. And that is it for this book 4, and we will move on to the next one, book 12.
Book 12, Lessons on Perfect Virtue, or Ren, on Government and Other Questions of Morality. For Ren, Ren is the epitome of moral excellence and virtuous character in Confucian theory. It encompasses not just personal ethics, but also the development of a peaceful and prosperous human society. There's an excerpt from Liu Baonan's commentary about this, which it emphasizes the value of taking personal responsibility, exercising self-control, and internalizing the moral values found in Confucian ethics. It is consistent with the larger Confucian idea that social harmony and order are upheld by virtue and individual example rather than by the use of force or coercive legislation. See no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. This Confucianism does place a strong emphasis on cultivating virtues, acting morally, and showing respect for others. It is more likely that the phrase does not go along with the image of the three monkeys is a cultural manifestation of these larger ethical standards. On insights into the diverse interpretations of the Confucian idea of goodness or Ren made by different people in the Analects. For Zonggong on goodness, it is encouraging people to treat others the way they want to be treated, just like the Confucius golden rule, which is do not impose upon others what you yourself do not desire. The advice promotes the virtue of dutifulness or respect with the goal of preventing resentment in both public and private life. On Simanyu, on goodness, it implies that it is difficult to be truly virtuous, and that one should use caution when speaking so that their deeds correspond with what they say or the words that they're saying. Next, on Fan Shi's question about goodness, from the fundamental Confucian idea that goodness entails a sincere care for other people's welfare. It highlights the value of empathy and care for others and represent the larger concept of Ren as benevolence. Confucian perspectives on being a gentleman, emphasizing aspects such as self-cultivation, ethical conduct, cultural refinement, and the importance of positive influence on others. On Simanyu, on being a gentleman, the premise is that a genuine gentleman has no reason to be afraid or anxious as he sees no flaws in himself. News focus is also redirected by Confucius from external conditions to the development of one's own moral character. Zisia's response on brotherhood and being a gentleman. It emphasizes that everyone in their four C's can be regarded as a brother via moral behavior, expanding the idea of brotherhood not just because of blood. Zi Cheng's question and Zigong's response. It emphasizes the connection between native substance and cultural refinement in response, comparing it to the skin of a tiger or leopard. The analogy implies that although a person's natural material is important, their cultural sophistication enriches and sets them apart. Next is Confucius on gentleman's behavior. Positive compliments and words of encouragement are prioritized, and also a gentleman encourages a culture of growth and mutual support by finding joy in the quality and abilities of others. Confucius offers guidance and accumulating virtue, resolving confusion, and addressing ethical challenges. Ziyang on accumulating virtue and resolving confusion, he underlines or he emphasized that acting with moral integrity, dependability, and the filial piety are necessary for building virtue. And also, the contradicting intentions for someone to live and then die are specifically mentioned in relation to confusion in desires. Such incoherence is viewed by Confucius as a type of moral confusion. For Fanshi's question on accumulating virtue, reforming vice, and resolving confusion, Confucius lays out 3 guidelines about this. First is accumulating virtue by prioritizing service over profit. Second is to reform vice. One must focus on one's own shortcomings instead of concentrating on those of others. Lastly is keeping oneself clear of confused moment of rage that cause one to forget who they are and harm their family as well as themselves. For resolution of confusion, people can overcome obstacles more skillfully if they view things clearly and avoid being emotionally confused. It is also better to be rational, and also the secret is to be self-aware and to have a good grasp of one's feelings and responses. Next is Confucius about friendship, seeking guidance on how to navigate the dynamics of advising or reproving a friend. For Zigong about friendship, Confucius advises that harsh reproof and instead recommends gentle correction. Placing a strong emphasis on gentleness is one method to keep the connection harmonious. This emphasizes how important it is to act morally and respect others' duties in a variety of social situations. Master Zheng on acquiring friends and learning. Paragraph stresses that the value of moral partnerships founded in shared knowledge and cultural appreciation. It also highlights how important good friends and teachers are keeping up one's devotions to the way. In Confucius offers perceptive rebuttal that stresses moral judgment and the capacity to tolerate unfounded allegation. This denotes a ruler who has a clear knowledge of the moral character of their ministers. Such ruler can see beyond the present situation to make well-informed decisions since they are not deceived by untrue allegations or slanders. On Confucius' teachings on governance, leadership, and the qualities expected of individuals in positions of authority. On Zigong's on governance and winning the hearts of the people, Confucius' preference for the virtue and the way above material existence. He places a high value on hearing about the way being practiced, which emphasizes the importance of moral principles and leading a good life in Confucian philosophy. On Duke AI and Confucius on satisfying the needs of the people, highlighting the fact that the ruler's well-being depends on the demands of the ordinary people being met, the monarch has the ability to bring prosperity to the ordinary people by reducing the burden of levies and taxes. Next, on Dukjing of Qi and Confucius on governing. This is consistent with the Confucian idea of rectifying names, which holds that people should live up to the expectation placed on them by their social duties. On Confucius on zealous decision making, it is considered a good quality to be able to make a decision about a case after hearing only one side. But though Zilu has many excellent traits, the mention of her stubborn attitude also serves as a warning about the possible consequences of acting hurriedly to meet commitments or make judgment based on incomplete information. Next is on Confucius on hearing civil litigation and the value of ritual. This passage emphasizes that the value of preventive measures above legal action, the transformational power of virtue, and the persuasive influence of a ruler's moral example. On the Zhang's on governing and the rule of virtue, the text emphasizes the relationship between one's behavior, leadership, and the strategies for gaining the support of the general public.
Alright, so let us now move on to the last book that we will be discussing. So it is basically book 14. Now, we entitled this Judging the Character of Others with the Master Evaluating the Behavior of Various Historical Figures. Now, the reason we entitled it this because a large portion of this book is dedicated to case examples of how one would go about judging the character of others with the master evaluating the behavior of various historical figures, noting both their strengths and weaknesses, and thereby illustrating the perceptive powers of a gentleman. On the minister's side, one must be dedicated to the way and not to the pursuit of salary, honest with oneself and others, and courageous and demonstrating with one's ruler when it comes to the matters of rightness. It says on the first dialogue that UNC asked about shame. The master said, when the state has the way, accept a salary. When the state is without the way, to accept a salary is shameful. He replied with, to refrain from competitiveness, boastfulness, envy, and greed. Can this be considered goodness? The master had replied, this can be considered difficult, but as for it being good, that I do not know. So, the master's answer to Yuan Shi's initial question seems to be an endorsement of his reclusive tendencies, which is perhaps why he is emboldened to offer his other achievements for the master's approval. This approval is, of course, denied in modern Japanese. That's why we have the polite locution, the I don't know, to soften its impact. So in here, the master said, a scholar official who cherishes comfort is not worthy of the name. So in here, comfort basically translates to Jew, literally mean dwelling, leisure, to sit, and seems to encompass both the physical and economical comfort. And the next one, the master said, when the state possesses the way, be audaciously correct in both word and action. When the state lacks the way, be audaciously correct in action, but let one's speech be conciliatory. So the word translated as audaciously correct means literally danger from being in high position, or more generally dangerous or endangered, and is variously glossed by commentators as strict, severe, lofty or noble, or correct. The sense in all of these cases are similar, endangering oneself by stubbornly adhering to the high ground, as opposed to being conciliatory or accommodating. Certainly, there are those gentlemen who are not good, but there has never been a petty person who is good. So there are occasions when even a gentleman does things that are not good, but this does not change the fact that he is a gentleman. Potentially, there are also occasions when a petty person does something that is good, but this does not change the fact that he is, in the end, still a petty person. Any goodness displayed by a petty person is temporary and superficial because his heart remains firmly opposed to goodness. In this passage, the sage or Confucius is indicating a method for observing and evaluating other people. In the next one, it says, it is difficult to be poor and still free from resentment, but relatively easy to be rich without being arrogant. So this statement portrays the privilege and complete unfairness when it comes to one's socioeconomic status. Poor people are struggling to be free of resentment due to the unfortunate circumstance. However, for rich people, it is quite easy for them to be free of arrogance due to how people perceive them and the material and non-material privileges that they have.
Rukiren or like goodness is the ideal of the virtuous person or exemplary human who embodies qualities like wisdom, kindness, and righteousness. Gongshu Wenzi is a cultured master, but Confucius seems slightly doubtful about claims that he was a true Wu Wei gentleman. However, he appears to be happy to grant that Wenzi is cultured. So the importance of choosing ministers wisely is when the talents of ministers are well matched to their jobs. Even ungentlemanly ministers can enable an incompetent ruler to remain in power. Going back to the difference between gentleman and petty person, a gentleman learns for the sake of his own improvement and out of the way. On the other hand, a petty person learns in order to acquire an official position and salary. People in the time of Confucius learned just to rule over others and receive credit for their good behavior, not to correct flaws in their own behavior. The gist of everything includes knowing the character of others and properly employing people. However, one must not be too eager to pass judgment on others, because even the master did not presume to declare himself a true gentleman or sage. As I quote the master, the good don't worry, the wise are not confused, and the courageous don't fear. Since their activities are in line with their moral standards, good people who exemplify kindness don't need to worry. The wise, with their sharp awareness and broad comprehension, are resilient to confusion because they make sense of their existence. Similarly, those who are resilient and courageous don't back down from a problem and instead use their inner strength to face adversity right away.
Next, for one does not praise a thoroughbred horse for its physical strength, but rather for its depth. Confucius employs the word depth to describe character. It refers to a more archaic idea of overall inner character or well-balanced excellence. It encompasses a holistic evaluation of an individual's moral and ethical traits, going beyond today's concept of virtue. The reason that one does not repay injury with kindness is that were one to do so, then everyone in the world would begin behaving in an injurious fashion, expecting to be rewarded with kindness. This is the way of inviting injury. The concept of impartiality or justice or gong is introduced by Confucius. According to him, being fair or unbiased does not include treating people kindly in all situations. Rather, it entails treating everyone fairly and with discrimination. This is consistent with the moral and ethical precepts of Confucianism. Those who crave speed will never arrive. Brooks and Brooks describe this passage as another vignette of cultural decline in the young, not a desire to improve oneself by associating with his moral superiors, but an eagerness to get ahead by hanging around the powerful. Confucius expressed concern in this paragraph about the deterioration of culture, especially in the conduct of the younger generation. The emphasis on rapid success and the price of personal development and the disobedience of ceremonial propriety are seen as indicators of a worrisome trend among the Confucian youth. Is this someone who is likely to improve himself? Confucius come to the conclusion that the boy in the book is more interested in achieving rapid success than in improving himself. The emphasis on rapid success instead of a commitment to progressive ethical development and self-improvement shows a lack of patience and an eye toward short-term gains. Lastly, Confucius seems to be criticizing the boy's actions in this situation by highlighting the boy's transgressions of traditional standards of decency and decorum. which are essential to moral character and personal growth according to Confucian ethics.
All right, now that wraps up our presentation. Thank you everyone for listening. Now, however, our reading had a lot of heavy terminologies and heavy dialogues. However, when you really look into it and dive deep into it, there's a lot of messages that one could really relate to every single individual. And thank you everyone. That is all for our presentation.